For 65 years, the United States Army trusted one fire-starting tool above all others. It threw sparks at 6,000 degrees Fahrenheit. It never needed batteries. It never needed fuel. It worked in rain, in snow, and humidity so thick you could drink the air. Around 1980, they quietly stopped issuing it. No announcement, no recall, no explanation. The tool still works. It costs $8, and almost nobody in your neighborhood owns one. Think about that for a second. The average household burns through a disposable lighter every few weeks. $2 here, $2 there. You spend more per year on fire you take for granted than it would cost to buy a single rod that lasts a decade. Now imagine the grid goes down. An EMP, a solar event, a cascading infrastructure failure. Your lighters are dead. Your matches are finite, and there is no resupply truck coming. By the end of this video, you will know exactly what this tool is, how the military used it, why it was dropped, and how to use it yourself, in under 10 seconds, in any weather, with no fuel and no electricity. Welcome. If you are new here, this is what we do. We dig into the practical knowledge that institutions stopped teaching, not because it failed, because it stopped being profitable. We go through the documentation, we follow the timeline, and we put proven tools back in your hands. If that sounds like something worth staying informed about, the subscribe button is right there. No pressure, just awareness. Now let us go back to where this started. Vienna, 1903. A chemist named Karl Auer von Welsbach was experimenting with rare earth metals in his laboratory. Auer von Welsbach was not obscure. He had already invented the gas mantle that lit streets across Europe. He understood what metals did under stress. And in 1903, he discovered that a specific alloy of cerium, lanthanum, and iron produced a shower of white-hot sparks when scraped with steel. He filed his patent in 1907. Within a decade, militaries noticed. By 1915, the United States Army had adopted the Ferrocerium rod as a standard fire-starting component in combat survival kits. Think about what that means. The Western Front. Trenches flooded with mud and rain. Matches were useless. Liquid fuel was a logistics headache. But a small metal rod that threw sparks when struck, that worked. Every time. Or, and it had a tactical advantage nobody talks about. A match produces a visible flame. At night, in a trench, that flame is a target. A ferro rod throws sparks downward directly into tinder, low, fast, nearly invisible from a distance. From the Western Front, the rod followed American forces through every major conflict. World War II, standard issue. The Pacific Theater, where humidity rotted everything that was not metal or stone, the ferro rod did not care. Vietnam, jungles where the air itself was wet. Special forces carried it because it was the one ignition source the environment could not kill. The British SAS adopted it for escape and evasion kits. Think about that context. If you are a special operations soldier behind enemy lines with no resupply, you carry only what is proven, only what is light, only what will not fail. They chose the ferro rod. That is not a product review. That is a 65-year multi-theater, multinational combat endorsement. The most demanding testing authority on Earth put its name on this tool for more than 6 decades. And then, around 1980, it disappeared from the kit. Not because it broke, because something plastic showed up. Now, if you are watching this and wondering how deep the documentation goes, I want you to know something. What you're seeing right now is the surface. Behind every video on this channel, there is a full research archive. We call it the Vault. Inside you will find sourced timelines, original patent references, military procurement records, alloy specification sheets, and field-tested comparison data that did not fit into a 10-minute video. No fluff, no filler. Just the material behind the material. The link is in the description. But everything you need to understand this tool is right here in this video. Stay with me. So what is actually happening when you scrape a ferro rod? Here is the science, plain and simple. The rod is an alloy. Roughly 70% rare earth metals, primarily cerium and lanthanum. The remaining 30% is iron. This specific combination has a property called pyrophoric oxidation. When you scrape the surface with a hard edge, you shear off tiny particles of the alloy. Those particles are so reactive that they spontaneously ignite on contact with oxygen. That is what the sparks are. Tiny fragments of metal burning in midair. The temperature of those sparks has been measured at approximately 3,315 degrees Celsius. That is 6,000 degrees Fahrenheit. For comparison, a standard butane lighter flame burns at around 1,000 degrees Celsius. The ferro rod spark is 3 times hotter. 3 times. Now here is the critical detail for the EMP scenario. The ferro rod contains no electronics, no piezoelectric igniter, no battery, no circuit board. There is nothing to fry. An electromagnetic pulse that would disable every electronic ignition device in your home does absolutely nothing to a metal rod. It is immune, not resistant. Immune. There is no electronic component to damage because there is no electronic component at all. One honest caveat here, and this matters. The spark is weatherproof. The system is not. A ferro rod will throw sparks in a hurricane, but sparks need to land on something that catches. If your tinder is soaked, well, the spark does its job and the tinder does not. The rod is reliable. The fire is only as reliable as your preparation. Remember that distinction. So it works. It has always worked. Which raises the obvious question. Why does almost nobody own one? This is not a conspiracy. It is market math. And market math is almost worse because nobody had to plan it. Around 1980, the BIC Corporation had perfected mass production of the disposable butane lighter. Cheap. Reliable enough for everyday use. And here's the key part. 0 training required. You click a button. You get a flame. Any private with no field experience could use it immediately. The military made a procurement decision based on convenience and training efficiency. They assumed perpetual resupply. They assumed the logistics chain would never break. They optimized for the easiest scenario, not the worst one. Now look at the economics from the manufacturer's side. A disposable lighter costs about $2. It lasts a few weeks of regular use. You buy another one, and another, year after year. That is a recurring revenue product. A ferro rod costs $3 to $8. It lasts 10,000 to 20,000 strikes. At one fire per day, that is decades from a single purchase. There is no recurring revenue. There is no repeat customer. No corporation with a marketing budget has any incentive to promote a product. You buy once every 10 years. And here is the part that should bother you. Look at every official emergency preparedness list in the country. FEMA recommends matches and lighters, not a ferro rod. You can check this yourself. Go to their website right now. Oh, the tool with 65 years of military service, the tool that is immune to EMP, the tool that costs less than a fast food meal, is absent from every federal emergency recommendation. Not because anyone tested it and found it lacking. Because nobody in the recommendation pipeline has a reason to bring it up. If you are still watching, you are already ahead of the curve. This is the kind of practical knowledge we recover every week on this channel. If you are finding value in this, hit subscribe. And more importantly, think about one person in your life who needs to hear this. Send it to them. That is how this information travels. Not through institutions, through people like you. Now, the honest part. I'm not going to tell you the ferro rod is perfect. It is not. Here are the real limitations, stated plainly. First, it requires learned technique. This is not a thumb-click lighter. You need to practice the stroke. The first few times, you will scatter sparks everywhere except into your tinder. That is normal. But it means you should practice before you need it, not during an emergency. Second, the tinder must be dry. The spark will fire in a monsoon. But if your tinder bundle is wet, those 6,000-degree sparks land and die. You need to understand tinder preparation. That is a skill, not a product feature. Third, the rod is consumed over time. 10 to 20,000 strikes is enormous, but it is not infinite. The rod gets thinner with use. It is a decade-scale consumable, not a permanent fixture. Fourth, after long storage, the surface oxidizes. The first few scrapes on a stored rod will produce weak sparks or none. You need 3 to 5 preparatory scrapes to expose fresh alloy beneath the oxidation layer. Not a problem if you know about it. A real problem if you do not, and you think the rod has failed. Those are the real limits. Here is how you use it anyway. Step 1. Prepare your tinder. The gold standard is char cloth, a small piece of cotton fabric that has been pre-charred in a tin. It catches a spark almost instantly. If you do not have char cloth, fatwood works, birch bark works. And here is the free option sitting in your house right now. Dryer lint. Pull it from the trap, keep it in a sealed bag, and you have a fire starter that costs nothing. Step 2. Hold the rod firmly with the tip resting near your tinder bundle. Not above it, near it. You want the sparks to land directly where they are needed. Close range. Step 3. Place your striker against the rod at a 45-degree angle. A firm, controlled contact. Step 4. Push the striker down the rod in a single controlled stroke, directing the sparks into the tinder. Here is the beginner tip that changes everything. Instead of pushing the striker forward, pull the rod backward while holding the striker still. Same physics, same sparks. But your striker hand stays stationary, which means the tinder does not get scattered by your follow-through. Practice both. Use whichever gives you consistent contact. Step 5. When the tinder catches, you will see a small glowing ember. Transfer it to your fire lay. Blow gently. Steady, controlled breath. Not a gust. A whisper. The ember will grow. The flame will follow. Time to fire for a practiced user is under 10 seconds. That is not marketing. That is field-tested, repeatable reality. That is it. That is the entire system. Let me bring this full circle. In 1903, a chemist in Vienna discovered that a specific metal alloy could throw sparks hot enough to ignite anything flammable on contact. By 1915, The United States Army had built it into their survival kits for 65 years, through 2 world wars, through the jungles of Vietnam, through British Special Operations escape kits. This tool served without failure. Around 1980, it was replaced by a plastic lighter that assumed the supply chain would never break. The Ferro rod did not fail. The institution simply stopped needing to think about worst cases. Today, that same tool costs $3 to $8. It lasts a decade or more. It produces sparks 3 times hotter than a butane flame. It contains no electronics, requires no fuel, and is completely immune to the one catastrophic event that would neutralize every other fire-starting method in your home. You now know something most households in your city do not. You know what the tool is. You know the science behind it. You know why it was buried. And you know how to use it. Send this video to one person. Just one. Someone with a family. Someone who thinks they are prepared. Someone who has a drawer full of lighters and has never once asked what happens when the lighters stop coming. Next week, we are going into the vault on another tool the military trusted and civilians forgot. You do not want to miss that one. Stay informed. Stay prepared. And remember, the knowledge is not hidden. It is just not profitable to share.